The canyon was quiet except for the sound of the river, rushing violently through the rocky walls. The sun was high, casting sharp light across the cliffs and the sparse trees clinging to the edges. Amid the noise of the water, a small commotion broke out on the shore. Ayoka, a young Apache woman, sat in the shallow grass near the river's edge, her legs motionless beneath her. Months had passed since her hunting accident, but the memories of that day still haunted her. She had fallen from a high ridge while tracking a deer and had broken her spine. The injury left her unable to move her legs, and though her spirit remained strong, her tribe increasingly saw her as a burden. Ayoka's mother, who once spent hours teaching her the ways of the land, had become quiet and distant. The elders, wrapped in tradition, whispered in corners, questioning whether she could still be of use to the tribe. Her father, usually proud and firm, avoided looking her in the eyes. Ayoka had long felt the sting of isolation, a pain deeper than any physical wound. On this day, the whispers turned to action. A small group of men from her tribe approached her. Their faces were stern, hard, unyielding. "It is time," one of them said. "The river will take her. It is the way of cleansing." Ayoka's heart raced. She knew what was coming. Though she had seen cruelty before, she never imagined her own people could do this to her. They believed that her paralysis was a curse, a sign that she brought misfortune to their tribe. Their plan was brutal: throw her into the river and let the waters carry her away. Fear coursed through her body, though she struggled to remain calm. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can still help. I know the river. I know the land. I am not weak." But the men were deaf to her pleas. Tradition, they believed, was above all else. They did not see her courage, her intelligence, or her value. Only her disability mattered. The first man moved forward, his grip firm on her shoulders. Ayoka twisted in her chair, her hands gripping the ground, trying to resist. But without the use of her legs, her strength alone could not save her. The men lifted her carefully, as if handling a fragile object, and carried her toward the river's edge. The current below was fierce, white water crashing against jagged rocks, pulling and swirling in unpredictable patterns. Ayoka's breath caught in her throat. She could feel the power of the river, the danger, and her own helplessness. Her mind raced for a way out, for any chance to survive. But the men held her tightly, determined to carry out their plan. Just as they reached the bank, Ayoka let out a sharp cry, a mix of fear and defiance. "I will not die like this. You will not take me from the world." The men ignored her, their focus only on the act they believed necessary. They stepped closer to the edge, and for a moment, Ayoka's vision blurred with tears. She thought of her life, her family, and the wilderness she had learned to know so intimately. She thought of the deer she had tracked, the fish she had caught, and the sun warming the cliffs at dawn. And then she felt the first pull of the river against her body as the men shoved her toward it. Time seemed to slow. Ayoka flailed, but the river's strength pulled her instantly. Her hands barely grazed the water before the current yanked her forward. She gasped, the cold water shocking her body. She tried to maneuver, to turn herself sideways, to grab onto a rock or a tree branch, but the river tossed her violently, spinning her in the white foam. Pain shot through her shoulders as she hit a submerged rock, her head barely above the water. Fear was intense, but so was her will to survive. She remembered the patterns of the river, the calm pockets hidden beneath the turbulent surface. If she could reach one, she might have a chance. But the current was merciless. Each movement was a struggle, and her arms were weakening fast. Her vision blurred, her mind raced, and despair began to creep in. Suddenly, from the other side of the riverbank, a shadow appeared. A man dressed in worn leather and a wide-brimmed hat was moving with determination. His eyes were locked on her, scanning the rapids, calculating the best path. He did not hesitate. Caleb, a lone cowboy who had been tracking game nearby, saw the woman struggling. He did not know her, nor did he understand her situation fully, but he could not stand by. Without a second thought, he dove into the raging water. The cold hit him instantly, and the river yanked at his legs. He fought the current, using powerful strokes and kicking against the rocks beneath. Water splashed in his face, and the roar of the rapids was deafening. But he focused only on Ayoka. Her hands reached out, her face pale and terrified, and Caleb knew that speed was critical. The river twisted and turned, threatening to throw him against rocks, but he pressed forward, adrenaline sharpening his instincts. When he finally reached her, Ayoka's arms were slipping, her strength fading. Caleb grabbed her firmly under her arms, securing her against his chest. "Hold on!" he shouted, though the sound barely cut through the torrent. Ayoka clung to him instinctively, grateful for the human touch, for the support that her own tribe had refused to give. Together they battled the current, Caleb guiding them toward a calmer stretch. Every second felt like an hour as they fought to survive. After what seemed like an eternity, Caleb managed to drag Ayoka into a shallow eddy where the river's grip loosened. Both were soaked, exhausted, and shivering, but alive. Ayoka's chest heaved and tears mingled with river water on her face. She looked at Caleb, unsure what to say, but words were unnecessary. Gratitude and relief shone clearly in her eyes. Caleb, panting and soaked, gently lowered her to a patch of grass near the riverbank. He wrapped a spare blanket around her shoulders, trying to warm her as best he could. "You're safe now," he said quietly, his voice calm and steady, a contrast to the chaos of the river. "You're safe." Ayoka's lips trembled as she tried to respond. "I thank you," she whispered. Her voice was weak, but her spirit felt renewed by this unexpected rescue. For the first time since her injury, she felt the warmth of protection, the assurance that someone outside her tribe valued her life. The evening descended slowly. Caleb built a small shelter from branches and leaves, enough to give them both protection from the cold wind and the insects that thrived near the riverbank. He started a small fire, and the orange glow illuminated Ayoka's face. She studied him in the firelight, noticing the determination in his eyes, the weathered lines on his face, and the quiet strength that had brought her back from the edge of death. She realized that survival depended not only on her own courage, but on this stranger's bravery as well. Over the next few hours, Caleb offered her dried meat and water. Ayoka, who had spent weeks struggling to feed herself from the limited resources she could reach, accepted gratefully. As she ate, she began to speak slowly and carefully, telling him her name, her tribe, and how she had come to be in the river. Caleb listened intently, nodding, never interrupting. Though their languages and customs were different, they understood each other through patience, gestures, and shared urgency. Night fell fully, bringing a chill and the eerie sounds of the canyon at night. Owls hooted in the distance, and the river continued to roar with power. Ayoka shivered but felt a sense of safety beside Caleb. She realized that though her body was limited, her mind remained sharp, and perhaps with this new ally, she could navigate challenges she could not face alone. They took turns keeping watch. Caleb knew the river could be dangerous even at night, with sudden surges and debris rushing downstream. Ayoka, though unable to move far, kept alert with her eyes and ears, noticing shifts in wind and water, patterns that even Caleb might not immediately see. Together they formed an unspoken team, balancing physical strength and knowledge of the land. As the night deepened, Ayoka allowed herself a moment to reflect. Her tribe had abandoned her, labeling her weakness as a curse, but she now realized that strength was not only measured by one's legs or the ability to hunt. Strength was courage, intelligence, and the willingness to survive against all odds. Caleb's courage had reminded her of her own. Though paralyzed, she was not powerless. She had the mind of a strategist, the instincts of someone who had survived harsh lands, and now, the support of a human who had risked his life to save her. Before sleep overtook them, Ayoka whispered softly to herself, "I will not let them define me. I will survive. I will prove my worth." Caleb, hearing the quiet words, nodded subtly, understanding her determination. Though neither fully expressed it, they both knew that the river rescue was only the beginning. Greater challenges lay ahead, challenges that would test both their courage and their ability to work together. The fire dwindled to glowing embers. The river roared in the darkness, and the canyon seemed to hold its breath. Two survivors, unlikely allies, rested in the night, ready to face whatever the next day would bring. And in that quiet, dangerous wilderness, a bond formed that neither distance nor culture could easily break, a bond of trust, bravery, and the unyielding will to live. The morning sun broke over the canyon, casting golden light across the cliffs and the rushing river below. Ayoka stirred under the blanket Caleb had wrapped around her the night before. Her muscles ached from the cold river, and her shoulders felt stiff from the struggle, but her mind was sharp and ready. She opened her eyes to see Caleb already moving, gathering wood and checking the river's edge for debris. He had been awake for hours, as if he had anticipated the dangers that daylight could bring. Morning, he said quietly, glancing at her. His tone was calm, steady, a reminder that she was not alone. Ayoka smiled faintly and nodded. Her voice still weak, she said, "The river. It almost took me yesterday." "I saw it," Caleb replied. "But it didn't. You're still here. And you're going to stay here." His words carried a quiet certainty that gave her hope. She realized that survival depended not only on her own courage, but on teamwork. And Caleb had already proven himself. They spent the early morning checking the surroundings. Ayoka guided Caleb, using her knowledge of the canyon and river to spot safe paths, calm water pockets, and areas with edible plants. Though her body could not move far, her mind was sharp and her instructions were precise. Caleb followed her guidance, impressed by her insight and intuition. He realized that though she was paralyzed, she was far from powerless. By midday, they had gathered enough food for the next day, berries, roots, and small fish from the calmer parts of the river. Caleb had crafted a makeshift sling for Ayoka, allowing her to carry small items and even move herself a few feet with some effort. She marveled at his ingenuity and determination, feeling a sense of independence she had not felt in months. As they ate, Ayoka spoke of her tribe, not to dwell on the past, but to prepare for the future. "Some will regret what they did," she said quietly, "but others, they will not change. I cannot go back yet. I cannot trust them to see me as I am." Caleb nodded, understanding the delicate balance of respect, caution, and survival. Days passed. Ayoka and Caleb worked together, creating small improvements to their shelter, setting simple traps for food and learning to read the river's moods. They laughed quietly at small jokes, shared stories of past adventures, and slowly built a rhythm of trust. Ayoka realized that the wilderness, once a place of isolation and fear, was now a space of empowerment and strategy. One afternoon, as they explored a narrow passage along the river, Caleb paused. His eyes scanned the cliffs above. "Someone's coming," he said. His tone was tense but calm. Ayoka felt a sudden spike of fear. Could it be her tribe? Or worse, someone from outside the canyon who might not understand? She tightened her grip on the blanket around her shoulders and focused. A group of men appeared, moving carefully along the rocks above the river. Ayoka recognized the patterns, the gait, the clothing. They were indeed from her tribe. Some looked angry, others hesitant. It was clear they had come to search for her, but their intentions were uncertain. Caleb whispered, "We need a plan." His voice was calm, but his mind raced. Ayoka, though limited in mobility, was quick with strategy. She studied the river, the rocks, the current. "We can use the bends," she said. "The river will protect us if we move carefully. We can stay just out of reach and they will tire themselves trying to follow." They moved cautiously, Ayoka guiding Caleb from her wheelchair sling. The river twisted around rocks and cliffs, creating small eddies and hiding places. Caleb followed her instructions perfectly, making precise movements to avoid noise and splashes that could give them away. The tribe members above cursed and shouted, frustrated by their inability to find her. Hours passed in tense silence. Ayoka and Caleb finally reached a small cave, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines. It was dry, warm, and invisible from the main river path. They rested briefly, catching their breath and drinking from a hidden spring inside the cave. Ayoka felt a surge of pride. She had used her knowledge, her mind, and her courage to outsmart the very people who had tried to discard her. Caleb glanced at her, admiration clear in his eyes. "You're incredible," he said. "Most people wouldn't think of this." Ayoka shook her head. "It's not about strength," she replied. "It's about knowing your surroundings, planning ahead, and using every advantage you have." Caleb nodded slowly, realizing the truth in her words. Humanity, he thought, was as much about intelligence and strategy as it was about courage and physical skill. Over the next few days, Ayoka and Caleb continued to explore the canyon, always alert to the presence of the tribe. They set small, clever traps and distractions to keep their pursuers off balance. Ayoka's mind worked like a chessboard, predicting moves, setting countermeasures, and turning her apparent weakness into a source of strategic power. Caleb marveled at her resilience, recognizing that her determination and intellect were her greatest weapons. One morning, the river had calmed, and a quiet fog settled over the canyon. Ayoka suggested they try to communicate with the tribe, not to surrender but to assert her position. Using signs and signals, she demonstrated her presence safely, showing that she was alive, strong in mind and spirit, and no longer a passive victim. Some of the tribe members hesitated, unsure what to make of her display. Others looked ashamed, recalling their earlier cruelty. Ahyoka remained firm, not aggressive, simply showing that she had survived and thrived despite their attempt to discard her. Caleb watched silently, proud of her. He had entered her life as a savior in the river, but now he saw her truly as an equal partner, guiding their actions, making decisions, and proving that courage and intelligence were inseparable. In the late afternoon, they returned to the hidden cave to rest. Ahyoka reflected on her journey. The river had nearly taken her life, but it had also led her to Caleb, and through their alliance she had regained her confidence. She realized that survival was not only about physical endurance, but about vision, creativity, and the willingness to act when others hesitated. She had learned to trust herself again. Caleb, meanwhile, thought about the world beyond the canyon. He knew that people often underestimated strength in unexpected forms. Ahyoka had shown him that courage, strategy, and intelligence could overcome obstacles that brute force could not. Humanity's resilience, he understood, was as much about mind as body, and those who combined both were unstoppable. Evening fell, and the canyon glowed with the colors of sunset. The river shimmered gold and orange, and the air was filled with the sounds of distant wildlife. Ahyoka and Caleb sat side by side, sharing a quiet meal, reflecting on their shared victories. The tension of being hunted faded slightly, replaced by a sense of accomplishment. They had outsmarted danger, survived the river, and reclaimed a measure of control over their lives. The final challenge came when a small delegation from Ahyoka's tribe approached, cautious and hesitant. They did not come to fight but to listen. Ahyoka, supported by Caleb, met them on neutral ground, speaking with calm authority. She explained her knowledge of the land, her contributions to survival strategies, and her ability to think and act decisively despite her paralysis. Her words carried weight, not because of anger but because of undeniable evidence. She had survived, thrived, and guided them all. Some elders lowered their heads, recognizing their mistake. Others were silent, struggling with pride and tradition. Ahyoka did not demand approval, but she did assert her independence. She was not powerless. She was not a burden. She was a strategist, a survivor, and a human being whose courage and intellect demanded respect. Caleb stood beside her, a silent witness to her triumph. He had saved her life, yes, but she had reclaimed it through her own actions. Together, they represented the combination of human ingenuity, courage, and partnership. In that moment, the canyon was not just a place of danger, but a stage where humanity's strengths, mind, spirit, and determination shone brightest. As night fell, Ahyoka and Caleb prepared to leave the canyon. The tribe watched from a distance, some in awe, some in reflection, but all recognizing that the woman they had once tried to discard had become something far greater than they had imagined. She had survived the river, navigated danger, and reclaimed her dignity. Ahyoka looked at Caleb, gratitude and respect in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for saving me, but for helping me see what I can do." Caleb nodded, understanding fully. "You didn't need saving," he replied. "You just needed a chance to show it." With the river behind them and the canyon stretching ahead, they moved forward together. Every step, every choice was guided by intellect, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. Ahyoka's paralysis no longer defined her. It was simply one part of a story of survival, ingenuity, and determination. Caleb knew that in this partnership both had grown stronger, and together, they could face anything the world or the wilderness might throw at them. The canyon faded behind them. The river roared onward, and the stars began to glitter above. The night was calm, yet full of possibilities. Humanity, Ahyoka realized, was never measured by strength alone. It was measured by heart, mind, and courage, and she had more than enough of all three.